Have you ever woken up on a perfectly ordinary morning with nothing on your schedule but regular, everyday tasks, yet felt an overwhelming weight pressing down on your chest? You look around the room. It is quiet. The morning light is filtering through the window just fine, casting familiar, gentle shadows on the floor. There is no immediate threat, no emergency waiting for you in the hallway, and no bad news sitting on your phone screen. By all objective measures, you are completely safe. But inside your body, a completely different, chaotic story is playing out. Your heart is racing like you're running a race you never signed up for. Your muscles are locked tight, and you feel this deep, exhausting sense of dread that you can't quite shake. It is an incredibly frustrating, lonely loop to live in. You sit on the edge of your bed and try to use your intellect to fix it. You tell yourself over and over that you are safe now, that the past is over, and that you have moved on to a better chapter of your life. You've done the reading, you've talked it through, you've analyzed the timeline of your life, and intellectually, you completely understand your history. You know exactly what happened, why it happened, and why it shouldn't matter anymore today. Yet, your physical body refuses to get the memo. It feels like living with a ghost that constantly pulls your focus backward, forcing you to look at the rearview mirror when you are desperately trying to watch the road ahead. It reminds you of moments, words, and feelings you would rather leave entirely behind. This mismatch between what your mind knows to be true and what your body feels to be true isn't a personal failure. It isn't a sign that you are weak or that you aren't trying hard enough to heal. It is the silent, ongoing language of stored survival patterns. When we carry unresolved pain, it doesn't just sit in our memories like an old photograph in an album. It lives in the present tense inside our nervous system. It behaves like a heavy, suffocating blanket that has been soaked in water. It is incredibly difficult to lift. It distorts every movement you try to make, and it colors the way you experience every single interaction, every conversation, and every quiet moment of your day. Think about how much effort it takes to just get through a normal afternoon when a part of you is constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. You might be standing in a grocery store line, or sitting in a meeting at work, or trying to enjoy a meal with people who genuinely care about you. On the outside, you look perfectly fine. You smile, you nod, you answer questions, and you play the part of a functional adult. But beneath the surface, you are working a double shift. One part of you is trying to pay attention to the present moment, while another, deeper part of you is frantically scanning the room, checking the exits, and trying to protect you from a danger that isn't actually there anymore. It is an invisible, exhausting tax that you pay every single hour of the day. We often get angry at ourselves for this. We wonder why we can't just let it go, or why we are still so sensitive to things that other people seem to brush off so easily. We carry a quiet shame about our inability to just be happy, to just relax, or to just feel settled in our own skin. But the truth is, Your system isn't trying to sabotage your happiness. It isn't trying to make your life difficult. It is operating out of a deep, fierce loyalty to your survival. It remembers how much a past moment hurt, and it has promised itself that it will never let you be caught off guard like that again. So it keeps the blanket heavy, and it keeps the defenses high, believing that this is the only way to keep you alive. Understanding that this heavy blanket is a protective mechanism rather than a character flaw is the very first step toward finding true relief. You cannot hate yourself into healing, and you cannot force a terrified physical system into a state of peace by being harsh with it. We have to learn to look at this heaviness not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a deeply exhausted part of ourselves that has been carrying a burden for far too long, waiting for the reassurance that it is finally safe enough to put it down. To understand why the mind holds on to these painful patterns so fiercely, we have to look beneath our daily thoughts and peer into how we are fundamentally wired. Our minds possess an incredibly sophisticated, ancient system dedicated entirely to keeping us alive. It is a system that has been refined over countless generations for one single, unyielding mandate: survival. This deeply rooted part of us doesn't care about our personal happiness, our career goals, our self-actualization, or our inner peace. It doesn't care if we feel fulfilled or relaxed at the end of the day. Its only job is to make sure you make it to tomorrow. And to do that job effectively, it operates on a very simple rule. It is always better to be safe than to be sorry. When we go through an event that feels completely overwhelming, chaotic, or threatening, whether it is a sudden crisis or a slow, grinding period of instability, this internal alarm system takes a high-definition snapshot of everything happening in that exact moment. It doesn't just record the main event. It absorbs the entire atmosphere. It registers the specific tone of someone's voice, the particular layout of a room, the way the light shifts through a window, a sudden movement in your peripheral vision, or even a specific, heavy silence that fills the air right before things go wrong. It gathers every single one of these details and files them away under a single, urgent category: dangerous. The mind stores these survival snapshots in a unique, highly specific way. Instead of archiving them as standard, distant memories that fade over time and turn into history, it keeps them active right on the surface. It preserves them like a live wire, completely free from the passage of time. To this survival part of your mind, those events aren't actually in the past. They are kept in a perpetual state of now, ready to spark the very moment anything in your current environment even slightly resembles that original, painful experience. The system doesn't have the luxury of sitting back and analyzing whether a current situation is truly identical to the old one. It doesn't take the time to ask questions or gather context. It acts instantly, because in a true moment of danger, a delay of even a single second could mean everything. This is exactly why you might find yourself overreacting to a completely minor, harmless disagreement today, or feeling a sudden, terrifying surge of panic when someone closes a door just a little too loudly in the other room. It is why a specific look on a loved one's face can cause your stomach to instantly drop, or why a sudden change in plans can leave you feeling completely untethered and defensive. When these moments happen, it is deeply discouraging. You feel exposed, raw, and completely out of control. But it is vital to recognize that this isn't a flaw in your character, and it isn't a sign that your mind is broken. That is your survival mechanism working exactly as it was designed to do. It is misinterpreting a current, safe situation as an exact repeat of a past hurt, and it is rushing to your defense with everything it has. Living this way means your system is constantly playing a game of match the pattern. It looks at your present through the lens of your past, trying to spot the warning signs before the pain happens again. If you had to look out for unpredictable behavior in the past, your mind becomes an expert at reading micro-expressions today. If you had to be perfect to stay safe, your mind treats the smallest mistake as a total emergency. It is a beautiful, tragic design. It is beautiful because it shows just how incredibly resilient you are and how hard your system has fought to protect you. But it is tragic because it leaves you trapped in a fortress of your own making, unable to let your guard down, and unable to feel the genuine safety and warmth that is actually available to you right now. To heal, we have to help this survival system understand that the war is over and that it no longer needs to fight so hard to keep you alive. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung spent an entire lifetime exploring the hidden, unexamined forces that dictate our lives from behind the scenes, shaping our choices and our feelings without our conscious permission. He once captured this profound truth in a single, haunting observation. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This insight captures the exact physical and emotional mechanics of how we carry unaddressed pain. When we experience something that is simply too intense, too heartbreaking, or too overwhelming to process in the moment, we don't actually get rid of it. We can't just dissolve it into thin air. Instead, we simply push it down, out of our immediate awareness, burying it deep within the reservoir of the unconscious mind and into the very physical tissues of our body. We turn the pain into a shadow, and that shadow takes up residence inside our physical form. Because these defensive responses are hidden from our daily, conscious awareness. We go about our lives completely unaware that they are still running in the background, consuming our energy. We walk through our days wondering why we keep running into the exact same emotional walls, why we feel a sudden, unexplainable tightness in our throat when we try to speak up for ourselves, or why our chests feel perpetually restricted. We wonder why we keep choosing the same exhausting, painful dynamics in our relationships, or why our bodies feel completely spent even after a full night of sleep. It feels like a strange, repetitive twist of fate, like we are cursed to keep reliving the same painful chapters over and over again. no matter how hard we try to change. But it isn't fate at all. It is the shadow in the body. It is the unconscious mind, carrying the heavy, unacknowledged burden of our history, trying to protect us the only way it knows how, by keeping the physical body on high alert. When you swallow your anger to keep the peace, that anger doesn't disappear. It locks itself into the tension of your jaw and the tightness of your shoulders. When you tuck away your grief because there is no time or safety to cry, that sorrow settles deeply into your chest, making your breath shallow and guarded. The body becomes a living archive of every storm you had to survive without a place to shelter. It holds the memories your mind tried to gloss over or forget, acting like a loyal container for everything you weren't ready to process. This physical storage of pain creates an invisible barrier between us and the world. We try to build a life of joy and connection, but the body keeps reacting to old cues, sending signals of distress up to the brain. You might be sitting in a completely peaceful environment, surrounded by people who love you, yet your hands are shaking, or your stomach is tied in a knot. It feels incredibly alienating because you feel divided against yourself. Your mind wants to be present, but your body is stuck in a past archive. This internal division is exhausting. It takes a massive amount of life force to keep the shadow locked away, to keep pushing down the old hurts every time they try to rise to the surface. To heal, we have to stop treating these physical symptoms as enemies or defects that need to be aggressively wiped out. We have to realize that the tightness, the pain, and the chronic exhaustion are actually the language of our hidden pieces trying to get our attention. The shadow in the body isn't a curse. It is a map. It shows us exactly where we stopped being able to process our lives, and where we need to bring our warmth and presence. By learning to tune in to these physical sensations with kindness instead of frustration, we begin the gentle work of lifting the shadow, making the unconscious conscious, and finally, letting the body know that it no longer has to hold on to the past to keep us safe. Living with a system that is constantly scanning for danger takes an immense, invisible toll on our daily existence. Think about how much energy it takes to keep a car engine revving at its absolute limit, hour after hour, without ever letting it idle, without ever turning the key to off. That is exactly what happens inside your body when you are carrying unresolved stress. You might notice it in the small, seemingly insignificant habits of your day, the tiny details of your routine that feel entirely normal to you, but are actually loud signals of a system on fire. Maybe you are the person who can never sit with your back to the door in a crowded room, always needing to see who is coming and going. Perhaps you find yourself constantly anticipating the worst-case scenario in every casual conversation. Or you notice that your shoulders are perpetually pulled up toward your ears like shields, even when you're just sitting on the couch trying to watch television. This constant vigilance changes the very fabric of how we experience the world around us. It drains your vitality, making even the most basic, everyday tasks feel monumental. When your internal resources are entirely consumed by the invisible, exhausting project of keeping you safe from the past, there is very little energy left for creativity, joy, or genuine connection. You end up feeling like an observer in your own life, watching others move through the world with a lightness and ease that feels entirely out of reach for you. You start to wonder if this chronic exhaustion is just who you are now, accepting a diminished version of your life, because just getting through the day takes everything you have. The tragedy of high alert is that it tricks you into believing that peace is dangerous. When your system is used to chaos or constant threat, a quiet moment doesn't feel relaxing. It feels terrifying. If things are going well, your mind immediately starts wondering when the trap is going to spring. You become hyper-vigilant about the silence, waiting for the argument, the letdown, or the loss that you feel must be right around the corner. You can't fully invest in love because you're already preparing for the abandonment. You can't celebrate a victory because you're already bracing for the next failure. It is a lonely, agonizing way to live because it cuts you off from the very things you are fighting so hard to find: safety, closeness, and rest. It affects your relationships in ways that break your heart. You might find yourself snapping at the people you love most, your patience wearing thin over something completely trivial, like a glass left on the counter or a slightly delayed text message. In those moments, it feels like you are watching yourself from outside your body, wishing you could stop the harsh words from coming out. But the system is just too raw, too overloaded to filter the response. Or perhaps you do the opposite. You completely shut down, pulling away into a cold, protective shell, because any emotional demands feel like a mountain you don't have the strength to climb. You watch the people who care about you look at you with confusion or hurt, and the guilt builds up inside you, adding another heavy layer to an already unbearable weight. This daily cost isn't just emotional, it is deeply physical. The body cannot sustain a permanent state of emergency without paying a price. It shows up in the chronic tension that leaves your body aching by 5 o'clock, the digestive issues that never seem to clear up, and the deep, heavy fog that settles over your brain. It shows up in the way you lie awake at 3 a.m., your mind spinning through endless checklists and hypothetical arguments while the rest of the world is asleep. You are paying for your survival with your well-being, trading your long-term vitality for short-term protection. To heal, we have to recognize this immense cost and begin the gentle, patient work of showing our system that the emergency has passed, allowing the engine to finally slow down, cool off, and rest. One of the most discouraging and deeply frustrating parts of this journey is the realization that you cannot simply think your way out of a physical response. How many times have you tried to use logic to calm a sudden, unexplainable wave of panic? You sit there, completely aware of your surroundings, repeating to yourself like a mantra, "I am fine. There is nothing to worry about. I am completely safe. This makes no sense. You look around and see no danger, no threats, nothing out of place. But the knot in your stomach tightens anyway. Your heart continues to hammer against your ribs, and your breath stays shallow and trapped in your chest. It feels incredibly alienating because you can see the irrationality of your reaction with perfect clarity. Yet you feel completely powerless to stop it from taking over your body. This happens because the parts of our system responsible for keeping us alive operate at a much deeper, faster, and more primal level than our logical, thinking mind. When a past trigger is pressed, the survival center immediately takes the wheel, bypassing your conscious thought entirely. It acts long before your intellect has a chance to evaluate the situation, check the facts, or look at the evidence. It doesn't care about your logic or your rational arguments. It only cares about response time. Trying to stop a physical stress response with pure logic is like standing in the middle of a torrential downpour and yelling at the storm to stop raining. It is a mismatch of languages. To truly change these deeply ingrained patterns, we have to stop relying solely on our thoughts and learn to communicate with our system using a language it actually understands, the language of physical sensation, presence, and somatic comfort. It is heartbreaking when we don't understand this boundary between the mind and the body. We end up blaming ourselves for our symptoms, assuming that if we were just smarter, stronger, or more disciplined, we would be able to control our anxiety. We read book after book, analyze our childhoods, and collect psychological concepts, thinking that if we can just find the perfect piece of information, the puzzle will finally click and the pain will disappear. But insight alone does not rewrite the nervous system. You can understand exactly why you are anxious. You can map out the precise origins of your childhood coping mechanisms, and you can be a literal expert on your own trauma, and still find yourself shaking in a moment of stress. This isn't because you are failing at healing. It's because knowledge lives in the brain, but survival lives in the body. When we try to force our bodies to calm down through sheer willpower, we actually add more tension to an already overloaded system. We treat our physical reactions as defects to be conquered, which only signals to our survival mind that there is an internal war going on. The body senses our frustration, our anger, and our desperation to change it, and it responds by tightening its defenses even more. To break this exhausting loop, we have to meet our physical responses with a totally different attitude. We have to learn to drop down beneath the stories, beneath the endless loop of, why am I like this? And simply present ourselves to the physical sensations as they are when a wave of panic or shutdown hits. Instead of arguing with it, we can learn to say to our body, I see how hard you are working to protect me right now, and I am going to sit here with you through this. It is in this shift from intellectual warfare to somatic companionship that the old, frozen patterns finally begin to thaw. There is a strange, deeply confusing, and often heartbreaking phenomenon that many of us notice when we begin to look closely at the trajectory of our lives. We have a profound, unconscious tendency to recreate the exact environments and dynamics that hurt us in the first place. If you grew up in a home where you constantly had to walk on eggshells to avoid unpredictable anger, you might find yourself as an adult repeatedly drawn to unpredictable, volatile, or emotionally unavailable partners. If you learned early on in life that your worth was entirely tied to your productivity or how much you could do for others, you might find yourself consistently accepting or friendships that demand absolute self-sacrifice and offer zero appreciation in return. You find yourself trapped in a loop, meeting the same painful archetype of a person over and over again, just wearing a different face and carrying a different name. From the outside looking in, this pattern looks entirely self-destructive. It makes no sense to the logical mind. If you hate feeling abandoned, why do you choose people who cannot stay? If you are exhausted by being taken advantage of, why do you keep overextending yourself to people who only take? When we realize we are doing this, a heavy, suffocating layer of shame settles over us. We look at our choices and think, what is wrong with me? Am I doing this to myself? Do I actually want to suffer? We feel like a willing participant in our own undoing. And that realization can make you feel completely hopeless, as if you are fundamentally broken and incapable of building a healthy, peaceful life. But if we peel back the layers of shame and look at this compulsion through the lens of our survival mind, we find a specific, deeply moving, albeit distorted, purpose. The mind seeks out what is familiar because the familiar feels predictable, and predictability feels safe to a nervous system that has been shaped by stress. To an anxious system, a chaotic situation that it already knows how to navigate feels significantly safer than a calm, healthy situation that it has never experienced before. Real peace can actually feel incredibly threatening to a traumatized system because it feels like a trap. It feels like the quiet before a storm that you can't see coming. So, you unconsciously pull the chaos back into your life because at least you know the rules of that particular game. You know how to survive a storm. You don't know how to exist in the quiet. There is also a quiet, desperate, and beautiful hope buried deeply within this exhausting loop. The profound hope that this time, if we can just figure out how to fix the situation, we can finally master the old pain and change the ending of the story. It is a younger, wounded part of you trying to rewrite history. That part of you believes that if you can finally make an emotionally unavailable person love you, it will retroactively heal the original rejection you suffered years ago. If you can just work hard enough to satisfy an impossible boss, you will finally prove to yourself that you are enough. It is a relentless quest for a different conclusion. But the tragedy of the repetition compulsion is that we are trying to heal the past by breaking ourselves against the present. We are using the exact same old tools, expecting a different result, and only succeeding in re-wounding ourselves in the process. True healing doesn't happen by finally winning an old, unwinnable fight. It happens when we finally realize we don't have to step into the ring anymore. When we find ourselves trapped in these relentless cycles of overreaction, emotional numbing, and chronic physical exhaustion, it is incredibly easy to turn our focus inward with a deep, searing anger and resentment. We get furious at our own bodies for letting us down yet again. We feel a heavy, suffocating wave of shame when we lose our temper over something minor, like a misplaced set of keys or a slightly tense tone from a coworker. We feel weak when we have to cancel plans with people we love because the sheer, overwhelming thought of leaving the safety of our home feels like a mountain we do not have the strength to climb. We look in the mirror on the hard days and think, why can't I just be normal? What is wrong with me? Why am I so broken? This internal blame game is a quiet, daily cruelty we inflict upon ourselves. We look at our anxiety, our panic, our hypervigilance, and our tendency to isolate as if they are personal failures, as if they are definitive proof that we lack discipline, strength, or character. And we look at other people moving through the world with an apparent lightness, and we use their ease as a weapon against ourselves, measuring our messy, painful internal reality against their polished exteriors. We treat ourselves like a broken machine that needs to be aggressively scolded, punished, and forced back into working order. But the most profound truth of this journey is that true, lasting transformation can never take root in an environment of self-judgment. You cannot shame yourself into a state of peace, and you cannot hate your way into healing. When we treat our symptoms with frustration and anger, we are actually adding more hostility to an internal ecosystem that is already terrified. To begin shifting these deeply ingrained patterns, we have to completely turn our perspective upside down. We have to change how we view our struggles entirely. Those difficult, inconvenient reactions, the sudden spike in your heart rate, the immediate urge to run away, the emotional wall you build around your heart, the physical shutting down, are not signs that you are defective or broken. They are beautiful, tragic proofs of your incredible resilience. They are the highly specialized, brilliant, protective strategies developed by a younger, more vulnerable version of you to survive a genuinely difficult, overwhelming time. When you were younger and facing chaos, unpredictability, or rejection, your system didn't have the luxury of waiting for things to get better. It had to adapt instantly to keep you safe. The anxiety that exhausts you today was the very shield that kept you alert enough to avoid danger back then. The emotional numbness that makes you feel disconnected now was the anesthesia that allowed your heart to survive a pain that was too massive to feel all at once. Your symptoms are not defects. They are old armor. When you can look at your current struggles not as character flaws, but as ancient protective gear that you simply don't need to wear anymore, your entire internal landscape begins to soften. You stop fighting yourself. You shift from asking, "Why am I so broken?" to asking with gentle curiosity, "What part of me is still feeling threatened right now? And how can I help it feel safe?" This change in attitude changes everything. It allows the terrified, guarded pieces of your history to finally drop their defenses. When you meet your pain with compassion, rather than blame. You create a space where your nervous system can finally breathe, step out of the war zone, and begin the quiet, beautiful process of coming home to itself. If we cannot think our way into healing, and if logic alone falls short, how do we actually reach the parts of ourselves that are still trapped in the past? How do we talk to a system that doesn't understand the language of words? We do it by turning our attention directly to our physical sensations. The body holds the true, unedited record of our lives. It is the canvas upon which our history is written. Long after our minds have tried to gloss over an event, rationalize away a betrayal, or minimize a loss, the body remembers. It remembers the words that broke our hearts, the environments that made us feel small, and the moments we had to swallow our truth just to stay safe. When we begin to slow down and listen to our physical self, we start to notice the exact ways our history is still living, breathing, and reacting within us. This language of the body doesn't speak in complete sentences or complex theories. It speaks in physical symptoms and silent signals. It speaks in the sudden, sharp knot that forms in your stomach when you are about to speak your mind. It speaks in the heavy, crushing pressure on your chest that makes it feel like there isn't enough air in the room, or the way your jaw automatically locks itself into a tight, defensive line when you walk into an environment that feels unpredictable. It is the cold numbness in your fingers when you feel emotionally overwhelmed, and the invisible wall that pulls down behind your eyes when you want to connect, but your system decides it is safer to disappear. These aren't random malfunctions. This is your physical self crying out, using the only vocabulary it has to say, "Something here feels just like the thing that hurt us before." Learning this language doesn't require grand, dramatic gestures. And it doesn't mean you have to go through painful, exhausting ordeals to shake the stress out of your system. It begins with very small, deliberate, and incredibly gentle moments of awareness scattered throughout your regular day. It means noticing the exact moment your breath hitches during an uncomfortable phone call, and instead of pushing through and ignoring it, you gently allow your exhalation to lengthen. It means feeling the solid, unyielding weight of your feet firmly planted on the floor when a sudden wave of anxiety hits you in public, using that physical contact to remind your system that you are anchored in the present room, on a safe floor, in this current year. By tracking these subtle sensations, the tightness, the warmth, the fluttering, the numbness, and meeting them with quiet curiosity rather than frustration, you begin to change your relationship with your body. Instead of treating your physical form like an unpredictable enemy you have to manage or a broken vehicle you have to fix, you start treating it like a dear, frightened friend who has been left out in the cold for too long. Every time you stay present with a difficult sensation without trying to fix it, run from it, or judge it, you send a powerful, healing message down into your nervous system, a message that words could never fully convey. I am here. I am not running away this time. I am paying attention. and we are safe right now. This somatic presence is the bridge that allows the old, frozen energy of the past to finally melt, giving your system the physical proof it needs to realize that the danger has passed, and it is finally okay to breathe again. As we continue this practice of listening to the body and learning its silent language, we inevitably begin to come face to face with the parts of ourselves we have spent a lifetime disowning, hiding away, or running from. We meet the deep, roaring anger we were told was unacceptable, the profound, heavy grief we thought we had outgrown, and the raw, fragile vulnerability we locked away because it was too dangerous to show to a cold world. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung beautifully described this difficult but necessary process of inner reconciliation when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But to claim that privilege and to truly become who we are, we cannot leave any pieces of our story behind on the cutting room floor. We cannot heal by cutting off the parts of ourselves that hurt or the parts that make us feel uncomfortable. For a long time, you might have believed that healing meant erasing your past entirely. You might have thought the goal was to turn yourself into a pristine, unshakable, and perfect version of a human being, someone who never gets triggered, never feels anxious, and never feels the sting of old wounds. But that isn't healing. That is just another form of hiding. True healing is about integration. It is about expanding the capacity of your heart and your nervous system so that you can hold the full truth of your history without letting it dictate your present choices. It is about looking at the scarred, sensitive, defensive, and fiercely protective parts of your past and welcoming them back into the warmth of your life, giving them a seat at the table instead of locking them in the basement. Think about how much energy it takes to keep a secret from yourself. Think about the daily, exhausting effort of pretending you are completely fine when a part of you is screaming for help underneath the surface. When we reject our pain, when we tell ourselves that we shouldn't feel the way we feel, we create a civil war inside our own skin. We divide ourselves into the good parts that are acceptable to the world and the bad parts that we try to crush and bury. But those hidden pieces do not disappear just because we refuse to look at them. They stay down there in the dark, growing louder, turning into the sudden panic attacks, the unexplainable physical exhaustion, and the deep walls of numbness that keep us from feeling real joy. Integration means calling a truce in that internal war. It means sitting quietly with your loneliness, your fear, or your anger, and treating those heavy emotions with the same tenderness you would offer to a frightened child. It means looking at your most defensive behaviors, the ways you push people away when they get too close, or the way you overextend yourself to buy affection, and realizing that these aren't defects. They are just the wounded parts of you trying to survive. When these hidden, unconscious pieces of our experience are finally allowed to be felt, seen, and heard without judgment, something miraculous happens. They stop acting out. They stop blindsiding you in the middle of a regular day. When they are finally given permission to exist within you, they can drop their heavy shields, settle down, and finally integrate back into the wholeness of who you are. The journey of retraining a deeply protective survival system is never a straight line, and it will never be a quick, overnight fix. It is a slow, rhythmic, and incredibly patient process of coming back to yourself, one ordinary moment and one single breath at a time. It is a path marked not by massive, dramatic breakthroughs, but by small, quiet choices that nobody else will ever see. There will be days on this path where you feel entirely grounded, light, and beautifully connected to the present room. You will feel a glimpse of the freedom you have been searching for, and you will think that you have finally made it over the mountain. And then, without warning, a difficult day will come. A sudden shift in someone's tone, an unexpected email, or a heavy silence will throw you right back into the old, familiar panic, making you feel as though you have made absolutely no progress at all, and that you are right back where you started. When those heavy, discouraging days happen, and they will happen, it is vital to remind yourself that healing is not an all-or-nothing destination. Returning to your past patterns is not a sign of failure. It is simply a sign that you are a human being with a history. The fact that you can recognize your reaction now, even if it is hours after the panic has already taken over, is a massive victory. In the past, you might have been stuck in that survival loop for weeks or months without realizing it. Now you can look at your anxiety and say, I know what this is. This is just my old armor trying to protect me again. Each time you choose to take a slow, gentle breath, instead of spiraling into absolute self-blame, you are actively rewiring a lifetime of protection. You are proving to your mind and your physical body, slowly but surely, that the storm has actually passed. We have to let go of the idea that we need to be perfectly healed to deserve a beautiful life. The cracks in our foundation do not make us unlovable or broken. They are just the places where we had to carry too much weight for too long. The quiet path of return is about learning to walk through the world with your sensitivity rather than fighting against it. It means building a life that honors your pacing, a life that gives your nervous system the time it needs to catch up to the safety of your present reality. You don't have to fix everything today, and you don't have to carry the weight of your entire future right now. You only have to navigate this one single hour, this one single sensation, with a little bit of kindness for the person you are becoming. Slowly, as you keep showing up for yourself in this gentle way, the internal landscape begins to permanently shift. The heavy blanket feels just a little bit lighter. The old triggers don't sting quite as sharply as they used to, and the quiet moments stop feeling like an impending trap and begin to feel like an actual sanctuary. You start to notice a quiet, beautiful possibility expanding inside your chest, the possibility of truly living instead of just surviving. You are building a brand new foundation inside your own skin, one based not on constant vigilance and fear, but on a deep, unshakable self-compassion. You are finally showing the youngest, most terrified parts of your soul that they are allowed to rest, because you are finally here to take care of them, and you are never going to leave them behind again. We often treat healing as an eviction notice. We think the goal of this long, painful journey is to banish the anxiety, to completely cast out the fear, and to erase the scars so thoroughly that it looks as if the past never even touched us. But as you walk this path, you begin to realize that true healing feels much less like an eviction and much more like a homecoming. It is the quiet moment you stop trying to fix yourself and instead open the door to every exhausted, guarded piece of your story that spent years trying to keep you alive. The armor you wore for so long served its purpose beautifully. It shielded you when the elements were too harsh, and it held you together when things were falling apart. But you do not have to live inside a fortress forever, just because it once kept you safe from a storm. You are allowed to slowly undo the straps, unburden your shoulders, and feel the warmth of a quiet room against your skin. You are allowed to let your guard down. As you step forward from here, remember that your sensitivity is not your deficit. It is your depth. The fact that your system can feel so deeply means it also possesses an incredible, untapped capacity for peace, for stillness, and for genuine connection. Healing doesn't mean that difficult days will never return, but it does mean that when they do, you will know exactly how to meet them. Not with a clenched fist, but with an open hand and a patient breath. The road behind you was heavy, but the ground beneath you right now is steady. You have survived the survival mode. Now, softly, deliberately, and with all the time in the world, you are finally allowed to live.